My name's Debbie Deisher, and I've been going to Apex for about a little over 7 years now. I help out with the front line, so you might see me there some Saturday night usually, or you might see me in orientation class, and sometimes just whenever somebody calls and maybe has a need, I fill in for different things. I guess I have to kind of go back to being the little girl growing up who, came from divorced parents and looking for that love in your life. And I dreamed of growing up and getting married and having the white picket fence and cooking breakfast and supper for my husband, before and after he goes to work. So maybe it was a generational thing, I don't know. But God had different plans for me, and in 1976 at Ichthus, I had a great spiritual moment got to be there, and I wrote in my Bellway Bible that I accepted Jesus. But didn't really live my life for that. I was in youth group, but I was also going to school and at a different school than where I was going to church, and hung out with different people. But I was always a pretty good girl. Graduated high school, didn't date a lot in high school, went on to college, and didn't really date a lot then either, although I really liked guys and I was looking for one. But I always seemed to find wrong relationships, I guess. And obviously I was not really looking for them through a godly lens. So I spent most of my life kind of chasing after that love of my life. I graduated college and started nursing, and I lived in Kentucky for 7 years and always wanted to do travel nursing. So still hadn't found Mr. Wonderful. I had found a lot of Mr. Wrongs, and where it was dabbling in all kinds of lovely relationships, but nothing that was ever connected, which now I look back as kind of a blessing of the Lord. But I started travel nursing, and that was great. I thought, well, I'll get out here and be independent and look, maybe I'll find Mr. Wonderful in Alaska or something. And I found Mr. Wrong in Alaska, and Mr. Wrong in California, and Mr. Wrong in South Carolina. So I spent a lot of time just chasing after that dream that was elusive. Wasn't much of a churchgoer during that time. I did, ask God why hadn't I found Mr. Wonderful, but just not living for the Lord at all. I found myself back in South Carolina after different assignments, and actually experienced a really bad trauma of rape and kidnapping, and I think that was another pivotal point of crying out to God, but also running away from God, because I cried out to Him, but I didn't listen for His answer to just learn how to rest in Him. So did a little running in my life away from God during that time, and I think because of that traumatic experience also led a little bit more risky life with my relationships. I was living in South Carolina. I was working at my dream job as a flight nurse, and one day I woke up. Yeah, it always happens like that, right? And I was in this adulterous relationship, and I knew I was wrong. I'd actually started going back to church, and it was a good church, and I didn't reach out to anybody to tell them what sin I was in, but God was definitely convicting me of that, and I was trying my best to work my way out of that relationship, but God had other plans for me, and all of a sudden there was this job open back in Ohio near my family, and I was like, really, God, I don't want to move back to Ohio. 11 miles from the beach is really nice for me, and we can work it out here. And one day I was at the beach just crying and talking to God, and He was like, go home. And I was like, I don't want to go home. And I came up here, did the interview, and got the job, even though I'm sure I failed the interview miserably, at least in my sight, because I was very negative. I told God that I will listen to you this time. This one and only time. No, just kidding. But I will listen to you, and I'll move back to Ohio. And so I moved back, and I was going to Apex, and I was going to another church. And when I was at Apex, I just felt I did feel the conviction of my sins of the past, but I also felt the grace that could come from that. Relationships in the past, like I said, been through a traumatic experience with that. I'd also had abortions, and I was grieving the loss of children and the life I thought I could have had. But I remember coming home from Apex one day and just laying out on my floor, screaming, crying, having a nice little pity party for myself, but also telling God that no matter what, I would thank Him for this time, and that, I knew that He could forgive me of everything that had happened, and that His grace and love was big enough. And from that moment on, I was going to pursue Him like I had pursued all the wrong relationships in my life. And it was amazing. I mean, I don't want to say it was easy, but God was faithful. I thanked Him for the hard time that I struggled through, just getting through the forgiveness of my sins, but I lived in His grace at that point. And as a single person, I'm still single, and I can tell you that I've never been happier in my life. And the last few years, once I kind of got through that, I think it probably took me a year to just grieve what I had been through, and letting go of lost love and embracing the greatest love of my life. I guess I do want to say to the single girls out there that if you pursue Christ as your greatest love, if His desire is to give you another love on this earth, that He will do that. But I have learned that I can't put anybody else first, and I think I learned it a little bit the hard way, but I don't know that I would have learned it as well any other way. We can't change anything that happened yesterday. Even the good stuff, we can't change it. Even if it's a good relationship that just is not the right time, you can't change the timing. That's God's, and you have to trust in the truth that He does have His best for you. And I think the hard thing for us to realize sometimes is the time frame. When I think of myself and being a single girl, and it's like, okay, I go to college, I do this, I get my good degree, but always in the back of my mind, I'm going to be a part-time worker and I'm going to be married, kind of thing. And it's like when it doesn't happen on your timeline, you're thinking, okay, and you almost want to speed it up. And so trying to just rest in His comfort. And I would say that the hardest part is to just look forward. And just to focus on what's ahead, and sometimes it's having to focus as far ahead as heaven. That could be today, or that could be 60 years from now for us. That's what we're going for, but it's looking forward to that prize, and not settling for the temporary of today. I don't know that I would love Him as well or understand His love as well if I hadn't been through the things in my life that I've been through. So I just encourage you to just seek after God with all your heart, and He will give you the desires of your heart. And it might look different than what you thought it was going to be. But as I can say, I sit here today, and 99% of the time, very content in my singleness, and that 1%, God takes care